My next guest is a man who has become an incredible friend to me. As soon as I heard his heart and his story, I immediately admired his strength and his passion. His story begins with his birth mother, who was a mentally challenged woman that was gang raped at the age of 18. Despite his mother's lack of intellectual ability and her current state of living on the streets as a homeless woman, and the constant societal pressure for her to terminate the baby, she refused to have an abortion. Though she lacked intellect, she certainly did not lack in the will to do what is right for the baby growing inside of her. He commonly refers to his birth mother as his hero because it was her strength that helped him survive and gave him the opportunity for life. His mother eventually gave birth and made the courageous decision to give him up for adoption at a young age. He was raised in a Christian home with a strong biblical value system which has shaped the man that he has become today. It was only in recent years that he was able to meet his birth mom, and as you'll see in this episode, the moment they finally meet is spectacular. He has since become a recording artist, a worship leader, an author, and a national pro-life speaker with a passion to help make abortion unthinkable and share the power of adoption. He is quickly becoming a nationally recognized name and voice in the pro-life movement, and he's the founder and executive director of Broken Not Dead Ministries, whose mission is to use his story to see brokenness transformed into wholeness through inspirational content including music, books, and events. His book, The Journey, gives a captivating journey through his story, offering hope and peace to those who are broken. I'm honored to be a part of sharing his story with you, so friends, please welcome my friend, Steventhen Holland. Steven, thanks so much for being here, man. I appreciate you coming.
Oh, you're welcome, Joe. It's a pleasure.
I'm so glad you're here. I've really enjoyed, I know you were at my house last night, just getting into your story and into your life and just digging into that. And over the last few weeks, just learning a whole lot more. There's a whole lot of pieces about your story that I want to dive into in particular that I think are just going to be really helpful for us and for the viewers, for us to just dive into that and dig into. But first, I just want to start just giving everybody the opportunity to hear your story and just to hear that from you. So
yeah. Well, my story starts really when I was 8 years old. I was at school and I had some kids at school, I'd call them friends, I guess. They looked at me and said, "Man, you're weird." And I'm like, okay, what's that mean? And they're like, "No, your whole family is white, but you're not." And I kid you not, Joe, I look at my skin or I look at my hand and I see my skin and it's brown. I'm like, they're not lying, they're telling the truth. Something's not right here, something's off. So, I'm an 8-year-old kid and trying to process that, weird, different. It was a struggle.
Yeah.
So I go home. I'm just wanting to go to sleep. It's kind of a rough day, right? And my mom, she knew something was up. She could tell my countenance, and she said, "Son, what happened?" And I said, "Well, Mom, I was at school, and these kids looked at me and said, you're weird and different. Your skin color, your whole family is, you're the wrong color." And she's like, "Okay." She's like, "All right, sit down. Let's sit on the edge of the bed." So we're sitting there, and she looks at me, and she looks deep into my eyes, man. It was, I was like, something, it's getting real, right? And she said, "Son, I love you, and you're my son. You always have been. You always will be." And I said, "Okay, Mom, what's going on?" And she said, "When you were 7 days old, we brought you into our family as a foster child. So you're not of my blood, but like I said, you're my son, and you always have been. God created you for me and for our family." And I said, "Okay." Right? And she said, "And I want you to know everything." And I said, "I know you're only 8 years old, and you may not understand it all right now, but you deserve to know all that we know." So she said, "So hang on a second." So she walks over across the room to the closet, and in the closet, she pulls out this 3-ring binder, this folder, and it had 8 pages of typewriter paperwork in it from 1982 when I was born. And then she had journaled for the first 5 years of my life so I was a foster child at 7 days old, and then she told me that they officially adopted me at age 2. The reason it took so long for the adoption was because my skin color was different than everybody else's.
And just for clarity, you were foster with her?
I was in this family
Yeah.
at 7 days old.
Okay.
I came into the family. And what she told me was, she said, you were literally on death's doorstep. We were foster parents. We had 4 kids of our own, which are your brothers and sisters. I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters. But she's like, I don't know if you ever noticed this or not, but there's a 15-year gap between you and your sister.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I grew up with my nieces and
normal,
nephews.
right?
I mean, I've been an uncle since I was age 2, and it hit me like, oh, okay, wow. So that it all makes sense, right? So she looks at me and says, we literally brought you in very malnutrition. You were on the same bottle that you'd left the hospital with at 7 days old. Like, you literally were dying. And they told us that much. They said, he may not make it, but he needs a safe place. And they said yes. They opened up their hearts to this child that wasn't theirs by birth.
And do you remember the emotions that you feel in that moment?
Absolutely.
When you hear something?
It's the first time in my life that I remember being broken. Just not, why would a mother not want her son? Why am I their own color? I'm gonna grab a tissue if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it. That's why they're here.
Yeah, man. But it's just real. It's real emotions. And as an 8-year-old, I felt all of it. I was questioning, why in that moment to a God that I knew was real. But at that time, I didn't quite have a relationship with him yet. But I had a lot of questions, a lot of frustration, anger. I knew I was loved, but again, this isn't my family, right? That's what I felt initially.
Yeah. I would imagine too, there'd be like a confusion, just an overwhelming sense of confusion.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily just understanding at all.
Right. And just a lot of questions. I'm seeing these 8 pages of typewriter paperwork in front of me, and there's some things that are, that don't quite make sense. Because it's all broken. But I'm 8 years old, and again, it's just the overwhelming shock of learning all this information. But 8 pages of typewriter paperwork, all this journaling that my mom had done. Because she said, I knew that this moment could come one day, and I wanted to be able to give you as much as I could. And she gave me her blessing even then. She said, if there's ever a moment in your life where you feel like God's prompting you to reach out to try to find your mom at some point, your birth mom, you have my blessing, you have our blessing to do that. So she said, what I have right here, what I'm showing you is yours. So, do with it as you will. So at 8 years old, man, I find out that I had this whole story that I didn't know.
Let's dig into that. I like that you started where you did with the family that you know today, but there's a lot behind that. So dive into that piece if you will.
Okay. So I think from that moment, it was, all those questions of why and the struggle and the frustration and not knowing was always there. For me going through middle school, there were moments where, like, should I look for my mom? But the timing was never right. Like, there was doors that were closed. It didn't make sense at that time. Like, what if she has a family of her own, or and that they don't know about me, and it was just the devil kind of was beating me up over that. So middle school, high school was a struggle, just with that. But I pressed in, and I think this is part of my escape was sports. I knew that the hurt, the pain, all of that thing is, if I hit you really hard, playing football, I was earthquake and freight train, 200, none of your business, in 7th grade.
Yeah.
I was,
big boy.
Yeah, big boy, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like Jerome Bettis, kind of the bus, 255. I gave my weight away, sorry.
Oh.
Usually it's, none of your business.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the football, the baseball, the sports is where I kind of found that escape. Nobody was going to call me different and weird on a sports field, right? So I see that, even now looking back, that's kind of how I tried to process that.
Yeah.
But always there was this hole, in my soul, this longing that I didn't even really know what it was, but it was really that, why? What happened? Why would this mother not want her son? So, So I went through middle school, high school, get to college. I'm a youth ministry major. My wife was, or soon to be, actually, my fiance was an education major. She played volleyball, I played baseball. We knew early on that we wanted to start a family when we got married. So I graduated, or as soon as she graduated college, I graduated before her a couple years. And we got married in June of 2006. We started trying to have a family early on.
Yeah.
She was pregnant very soon into our marriage, and at 8 weeks old, we lost our first baby to miscarriage. As a young husband and young father-to-be, like, man, you talk about brokenness and hurt and pain. Like, how do you walk through that with your wife? You know, how do you process that? And so we lost this 8-week-old child. We soon got pregnant again, and we had a successful pregnancy. Isabella is my 12-year-old daughter now. Then we get pregnant again, and 10 weeks into that pregnancy, we lost another child. This time had to have a D&C, had to be surgically removed, and it was a whole different, because the first loss was passed at home, and even though it was traumatic, I was able to be there with her the whole time. And this time they had to take her behind closed doors, and me, I couldn't be by her side. It just opened up a whole another level of brokenness for me.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I started questioning, like, my existence, how I came into the world, all these questions, all those things that that opened up at 8 years old, started in the struggle with middle school and high school and being different and weird, that always kind of resonated. And in that moment, it was like the devil used that brokenness to really start clawing at me.
Sure.
Are we losing these babies because of my past, because of things that happened that, whether it be sin or whatever, it was just a root of evil or bitterness, those questions of why, again, coming up. But God used that brokenness to open up my heart to start, to maybe have some of those why questions answered.
Yeah, and I love that God opened that for you. Mm-hmm. I've experienced miscarriage before, and I know just as a husband that the automatic response is to care for your wife. Mm-hmm. And so in that initial one, you said, like, you were there and present and trying to care for her, and then God gave you the space in this one to start asking some of these questions, and especially knowing kind of what comes from that, and like what you began to discover in this kind of discovery process by asking some of those questions. So where did that take you?
Man, on a journey.
Yeah.
For real. God used that brokenness, man, to open my heart to start, looking. But it didn't happen overnight. It was, I just know in that moment was when the seed was planted. So then it's our fourth pregnancy. It's about halfway through the pregnancy. I was a youth pastor at the time in Tampa, Florida, at a church there, and we were in this little 975 square foot apartment. And I remember it. I was sitting at my desk. I was working on a sermon for the students, and the Spirit of the Lord just spoke to my heart, man, clear. He said, "It's time." I'm like, "Lord, it's time for what?" He said, "It's time to look for your mom." And man, you remember that 3-ring binder that I told you about when I was 8 years old? Like, I had it in a box somewhere. I just held on to it. And I go dig that out. So I have 8 pages of typewriter paperwork, and I have this journaling that my adopted family, my mother, did. And I get on Google, right? There's some good things coming on Google every once in a while.
Let's go to Google.
I take those pages, those 8 pages, I look on Google, and I just start name searching. And the first day I found a wedding invitation that had been scanned in that gave me, because a lot of the names on the paper were broken, didn't always have last names and things like that. Just aunts, uncles, grandparents, my mother's full name. I had that, Glenda Sue Holt. And so that the first document I found on day 1 kind of led me down, traveling down this road. Day 3, I find a website for this man named Steve Holt. Okay, I'm like, okay. My name's Steventhen, So, you know, I'm like, his name's
Something's
Steve,
connected
so,
there.
and his last name's Holt, so, you know, that's family name. Then I get on, like, I'm on his website and I'm reading his bio. And I start reading his bio, his family history, and I'm looking at this paper and like name matches. Literally every name on the paper matches some semblance of, you know, of his family history. But one specific name, Glenda Sue Holt. And that was his baby sister. And I was like, okay,
It's her.
this can't be a coincidence. Something's about to go down, right? And
Did you feel sure, like certain that this is her? Was there still any doubt at all?
there was some doubt. I mean, I think it was more fear. Like, I'm going to reach out to this guy, and he's not going to. He's like,
No
who's this
idea.
wacko, right?
Yeah.
You know, sending me this email. But I sent him an email, kind of, you know, very non-intrusive, I guess, you know. And so he, no, this is from his wife. He reads the email, you know, and I literally, this is what I wrote. My name's Steventhen Holland. I think I'm your long lost nephew. You know, I'm 27 years old, you know, and I'm like, that's enough.
Yeah,
Send,
that's
right?
all, no context.
So
nothing.
his wife reads, you know, he tells me, like, he reads this email. He literally almost passed out. Like,
Really?
you know, he pushed back. He pushed back, and so yeah. So at 27 years old, I'm finding my birth uncle online. So we correspond through email, phone calls over the course of a couple months, and then I decide to fly from Tampa, Florida, to Spartanburg, South Carolina, to meet him for the first time. So yeah, at 27, I'm meeting this guy. We spend like 2 days together. I mean, just literally crying, hugging, and then we start together piecing the story together. You know, like what he knows and what I know. And what he told me was, he said, your mother, my baby sister, Glenda Sue Holt, he's like, well, actually, he paused. He said, before I get into that, I got to give you some backstory. And he said, there's 6 of us. I have 5 siblings. All of us are mentally handicapped except for myself. So he said, your grandparents, my mom and dad, my dad died early on. Then my mom died shortly thereafter. We were all put into orphanages or foster care situations. A few of us were adopted. And he's like, my 3 sisters, your mom being the youngest, all are mentally handicapped in the fact that she only functions as an 11-year-old mentally. So now that you know that, he's like, now I'm going to tell you what I know, how you came to be. And he said, your mom was 18 years old. She was in a state mental hospital in Rome, Georgia. They had her set up with a work program so she could leave campus, you know, walk close by, come back. One evening when she was walking home from work, she was attacked and raped by 5 men. From that attack on her, shortly thereafter, the staff started noticing that she started showing that she was pregnant. And with a mentally challenged mother, homeless, really no job, no means to provide, you can imagine what this institution was telling her needs to happen.
So they found out just by the staff noticing your mom didn't say anything, or was she even able to comprehend or understand
I really don't think so. I mean, she was 18 years old, but it was like a little girl, you know, 11 years old in her mind. She was probably, you know, I don't know, I wasn't there obviously, but scared, confused, what just happened to me. You know, I can only imagine. My heart, it breaks my heart, you know. But so the staff, you know, so she notices they're pressuring her to abort, is what they're doing. You know, like really there's no other option, right? At least is what they were saying. So this woman that I call my hero, against all odds, man, she said, my son, the child that I carry, is worth fighting for. So she literally ran away. Somehow made it out of the institution. So my uncle's looking at me and he says, the last time that I ever thought about you, you were in the womb. He said, she came to my house when she ran away from there because I was the only person, the only family that could help her. I had a little trailer, and so he was a magician and ventriloquist. He traveled all over the world in circuses, and so he lived a life on the road.
Yeah.
So he happened to be home that week, and he had gotten in the shower to go do an event, and when he came out, she had disappeared. So he had not connected with her he had missed, they had been separated from 1982 to 92, so there was a 10-year gap. So, when I walked back into his life, he's like, man, you were literally in the womb the last time, and I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened after that. And he's like, and I'm like, you know what, Uncle? Let me tell you what happened.
Wow.
So I get this piece of the story, and then I'm like, I don't know how she got from your home to Chattanooga, Tennessee, but she wound up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She wound up in a women's shelter for unwed mothers, pregnant unwed mothers. And she befriended somebody that wasn't good for her as a toxic relationship. She ran away from that facility, kind of a pattern here, right,
yeah.
Joe?
Right.
And, but she made it over a mountain into a little community.
Like an actual mountain.
Yes, over a mountain, like literally. I don't know how,
Wow.
By car, but she winds up in this little community, this little town, right outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, called Whitwell. If you're from there, they call it Whitwell. Don't ask me how you spell it, but but it's a small little community, and there just happened to be a family there that had had a miscarriage 2 years prior, and God used that brokenness to open their heart to start foster parenting. And so this family that I grew up in, they were longing for one more little boy. That was their heart. That was their cry. That's why they even started foster parenting, was through the brokenness. And so when they get this call that there's this 7-day-old baby, that's what had happened. She had ran away. At the end of the pregnancy, she was living in a cardboard box behind an old grocery store in the middle of this little town. And there's a 16-year-old boy named Bobby who he had skipped school, was up to no good, I'm sure, right? And he walks around the back of this grocery store, and he sees a box move, and he pulls the box back, and it's my mother, 9 months pregnant with me. And she didn't have 1 day of prenatal care, like literally, just on her own, fighting for her son's life. And so he takes her. And this is so comical for me, man. He's 16 years old, right? She's 18 years old, 9 months pregnant. And he shows up at his parents' house and is like, surprise, right? look what I brought home.
What do we do with this?
Look what I brought home. It's not a cat, it's not a dog, it's a 9 month, and you can imagine his parents are like, what did you do, right? And we got to laugh because we're going to be crying here in a minute. That's why. Just the grace of God, the goodness of God. But I don't know if this family was believers or not, but they opened up their home to my mom and I for 2 weeks. They cared for us until she was ready to give birth, got her to the hospital, Erlanger Hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She gave birth to me there March 31st, 1982. But what I found out in researching for my book that I've written, they actually tried, the State Department, DHR, they tried to remove me from her in the hospital because they didn't feel like she could care for me. But again, she wanted to fight for her son, to keep her son. Yeah. So this family actually snuck us out of the hospital in 1982, which, security wasn't quite as tight as it is these days.
Still.
But snuck us out of the hospital, and she cared for me for 7 days until, I was on the same bottle again that I left the hospital with. She had given me cold water to drink. She rolled over on me at night. It was just, she couldn't care for her child. Mm-hmm. But in this family, they wanted me to stay in the family with this 16-year-old boy against the wishes of his parents. And I call it a God thing, but I truly believe God moved on his heart to say, you know what, this baby's not going to make it if I don't do something.
On the 16-year-old's heart?
On a 16-year-old's heart. And I don't know his relationship with God, but I know God's that big.
Yeah.
He can work in the midst of brokenness. He loaded us up in a car after his parents had left for work, and he drove us to Human Services in the county that we were in, and they, as a 7-day-old baby, they dropped me off. And that's whenever the Holland family comes into the picture. They were longing for this little boy.
As you're saying all of that, like there's so many different directions that you could go with that. But what I kept thinking, first when you talked about your mom, that she has the mental capacity of an 11-year-old. She is 18, but only able to understand with the capacity of an 11-year-old. And so this childlike element to her And then you start talking about this 16-year-old who's just a kid, and he's like, I gotta do what's right. And your mom's like, I gotta do what's right. And it's so simple. I think we can overcomplicate things, and they become way too complex. And so just the simple fact that God used something like a very simple childlike faith to protect you, of the faith of your mom, when the staff you said are telling to abort, and then the faith of this 16-year-old, right? And his parents are telling him to do something opposite, and they're just kids that are making these decisions that ultimately have you here sitting with me today. Like, that's so profound to me.
Yeah.
So let's get to when you met your mom.
Yeah.
And like now you're on this path of discovery.
Yeah.
You know all these details of this,
Right.
and so you're with your Uncle Steve, and so there's next steps, right? What's the progress there?
Well, obviously, like I said, we spent 2 days together, and during those 2 days, it's meeting and hugging, and like, what are you doing now, and all those things. So, I had shared with him that I've been in ministry for, at that time, about 9 to 10 years, a student pastor and worship leader, and just a man of God, that he saw me that way. So after those 2 days, and we've shared everything and caught up, he's like, okay, I didn't share this with you before because your mom, and he's trying to get it out, and he's like, well, okay, look, she's alive. And I'm like, wow, what? And he's like, yeah, she's alive, but I've got to warn you, I'm just going to be honest with you. She's in a state mental hospital. I don't know what her reaction is going to be. I don't know, she has a lot of anxiety and things like that. So I wanted to know what type of person you were before I allowed you the opportunity to get in front of her. And I said, well, I totally respect that, And he said, so she's alive, and she's 5 hours south of where we sit today. Man. And this is what he asked me. He said, do you want to meet her? And in that moment, I don't know if you remember me telling you, but I was sitting in that apartment in Tampa, and the Spirit of the Lord just came on me, and he said, it's time. Yeah. That's what he was speaking in my heart. He was preparing my heart. It just came on me that quick, and what came out of my mouth without hesitation was, it's time. So I wanted to go right then. It was like 7 or 8 at night. I was like, let's jump in the car and go now.
Like, I gotta figure this out.
And he said, no, we can't do that. It's 5 hours. I can't do that. And I said, come on, man.
Take a bus.
Let's go.
I'll go myself.
Right, exactly. Just give me the keys, and because I flew in, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, we go down the next morning, and so we drive 5 hours, man. I mean, I'm sweating and over talking, which I'm good at doing, and
it's gonna be a long.
It's a long 5 hour drive.
There's 5 hour drives, and then there's 5 hour drives.
Yeah. Like what's because it's unknown, how she can react. But here's the thing. Again, what God gave me a piece on was it doesn't matter what her reaction is. Like, I had to look my mom, my hero, in the face and tell her I loved her and thank you for choosing life for me. And that's all I needed.
What kind of questions are you having, like, as you're thinking about meeting your mom? Like, what's going through your mind about, what do I say? What do I ask her? What do I want to know? Like, I'm sure he told you some details. I'm sure there's more details that you just want to hear from her.
Yeah. Honestly, man, I think back to, that 8-year-old kid, like, why? These questions of why. But I think, honestly, God's timing's perfect. I wasn't prepared to meet her until I was 27 years old and experience brokenness in the life that I've, had been able to live up until that point. So I think for me, I'm trying to answer your question the best I can. I went in with no expectations at all. I just needed to tell her and hug her and tell her I love you.
She's your hero.
And thank you. And whatever else came after that was just going to be whatever, and hopefully it'd be a blessing. But a lot of times these reunions don't go as planned, and actually it didn't go as planned. What we had planned to do anyways.
Right. Thank you for joining us today. Our goal with the Living Room Show is to help inspire and inform you in the abortion conversation so that you can be equipped to go engage your communities as well. We've put together many resources to help you do that, and we would love for you to follow along. So feel free to subscribe to this channel and also check out the website at www.thelivingroomshow.org for additional resources. Also, we want to recognize our sponsor, Choose Life Marketing, who provides digital marketing resources to pregnancy resource centers all across the nation. Thank you so much for your interest. We love you and pray God's grace for you.